So I've been busy. I've been shooting photos every single day. I've been locked in. I've been daily posting on my Instagram new figure photos every single day. A new one goes up. And that's why this video took so long to come out. But now that that's done, I have like 30 different pictures to talk about today. I'm gonna go into behind the scenes, show my equipment, show my editing process, my setups, everything. I'm gonna do the whole thing. So without further ado, get yourself something to eat, get comfortable, get situated, and enjoy my feature-length film.
Okay, so coming back from a little bit of a hiatus after last month, I want to clean my setup a bit, and that means I have to get rid of this white mat I put here from the Akira shot I did like 2 months ago. It was cool for a bit, but now it's just gross, and I want to get rid of it so I can clean the table underneath. It's been a couple weeks since I shot anything, so I'd like to come back with a clean setup to work at it, you know? For this shot, I'm going to be photographing the Robot Spirits Evangelion Unit 2 from Bandai. For this shot, I want to use these mini-scale buildings that I got off of iPop Designs on Instagram. Super talented guy. I love the stuff he makes. Anyway, back to Unit 2. Because I'm using like the thruster pieces, I want to make it look like she's landing on the ground from the sky and like she just dropped in. So to emphasize that landing, I'm going to use these dust effects from Poncheesy. I'm very happy with these dust effects. Thank you for sending them my way. He even sent me this bigger effect, which is really neat, and I found a lot of use for that in this video, so thank you for sending me that. I'm very grateful. I started setting up the camera, framing the shot. I wanted to shoot from below at a slight angle. That way the foot on the left fills up the whole bottom corner of the frame. For the background, I decided on using this screenshot from one of the movies. I specifically want to use this rainbow in it, but like I'm not going to use the rest of it. Just this part of it is what I'm going to use. So I pulled it up on the big monitor, and I like how the colors look a lot so far, but I do want to turn the lights off to get rid of that reflection in my TV. I adjusted the background a bit so you could see the rainbow a bit better, and I raised the building in the back so that the logo would be in frame. I have this smaller light to brighten up the parking lot since it's a lot closer to the camera than the rest of the shot and the light's not hitting it as much. And lastly, I adjusted the focus a bit to get the figure's face looking a lot sharper. And for extra credit points, I went and swapped the lens out for my 28mm macro lens. I wanted to get like a reaction panel of Asuka like as it lands, like screaming, so I shot that with this lens. It's really good at capturing these close-up shots, though the setup for it looks really stupid because of how close I'm getting to the figure. Okay, so here's how the main shot turned out. I like how soft the shot looks, like the background kind of has this watercolor painting type of look going on. For Lightroom, I started with just some basic adjustment and also a bit more saturation. And then I specifically tweaked my reds, blues, and greens. And I made my highlights more of a greenish yellow because I felt the shot was just a little too pink when I shot it. So I wanted to balance that out of it. I also made a ton of masks in Lightroom. First, I have this mask on the rainbow, raising it a bit so it's a bit more visible. And then I have a similar mask on the sky as a whole, just making everything brighter. I added a shadow using a gradient mask to the bottom right-hand corner. And I made the dust in the left of the picture have a mintish color, that way it matches the dust in the background a bit better. It looked kind of weird where one was like more white than the other one. I made a very minor adjustment on the eyes, but like you can't even really tell. I don't know why I even did that. And finally, I made the entirety of Unit 2 just a tad sharper with more contrast, so that way she stands out a bit more. As for the Asuka like panel I was adding to this, I just pasted the exact same Lightroom settings from the main picture, and you know, that looks nice enough and it matches. I shot the original shot in 4x3, but unfortunately that is too tall, so I have to make a version with sidebars to accommodate this stupid ass website. And secondly, as you can see, I added the Asuka reaction panel to the top right, and I ended up angling it a tad. I made use of the background a bit here, which I usually don't. Really happy with this final shot. I think the colors turned out good, and it's got a nice soft look to it. This was a fun one to get back into the groove of shooting things with. If it were a good morning, I would be fishing. This new SHF Gon is wonderful. This is exactly what I've been wanting them to make for years. You know, I've had this Figma for years, okay? It's a classic figure in my collection. I've done tons of photos with him, and like, I've gotten multiple posts on the Good Smile official account with it. So I do feel a bit bittersweet replacing him, but dude, this is such a needed upgrade. He's wonderful to pose, I love all the faces, and I like that we finally have effects for Gon's like rock and scissors, though they forgot got the fishing rod and the backpack, and I feel like those are kind of important. I guess the Figma gets to live on through me continuing to use those accessories with my SHF. That's kind of nice. Back in May 2023, I did this shot with Gon fishing in this swamp area, and that was 2 whole years ago. So for today, I decided to remake that shot with the new SHF. It'll be cool to compare not only like how I shoot photos now versus then, but also how the figures have changed now versus then, because this guy, like I said earlier, is a huge upgrade. The method here is to use bendy wire as a fishing line and cellophane wrap as water. I started the setup off by using these paper towels as a floor, and then I put the wrap on top of it to make the water look bright and colorful. Then I added this log fish tank ornament, a 78 points diorama base, and also some kinetic sand to make a riverbank looking area. I also added some grassy shrubs and things, as well as this leaf on a Figma stand, that way I can like adjust where it is in frame. I felt that the old shot from 2023 was a bit too dim and dark and boring looking, so the goal with adding all these plants was to make the shot feel more alive. Then, for a bit of variety, I added these wood elements like these trees and also this fence. The background won't be too visible, but I decided to just put a grass rug there. I think it looks a bit nicer than just doing a boring blue sky background again, you know? It doesn't make a ton of sense, like why would the grass be going up like this, but you know, it works. I also added this little bird and I put him on a rock. One of my favorite classic ACBA TM techniques is using pillow stuffing as like waves on your water. It's one of those figure photography methods that's really creative and looks great, and it's just classic, you know? Whenever I got water, I gotta add waves to it. I just have to. As for lighting, I have these 4 lights spreading evenly across the photo, and with that, the setup is complete. Here's how the shot turned out, and I did some very minor adjustments in Lightroom. Mainly, I just wanted more contrast, saturation, and cooler colors, and also a vignette. Was going for a kind of stock standard look to the shot. I didn't want anything too stylized. I think the setup is really cool, and that's probably the best part of the picture, and I don't want to take the spotlight away from just like how the riverbank looks by doing anything too like out there with the editing. I did a couple of masks here. Main one is on the water, making it blurrier, and also giving it a more saturated blue. I wanted it to kind of look like Gatorade. I also made 2 other masks for the fishing bobber and for the bird to make them just pop out a bit more. I thought they like kind of faded into the image a bit too much. And yeah, that's essentially everything I got going for this one. I really love this picture. I think it's one of my favorites from this month, and it was cool to go back and remake an old picture years later, and it's cool to just see the difference between like how much better this Gon is than that Figma was. I still love that Figma, like I said, bittersweet replacing it, but dude, I am just so happy with this upgrade. You know, I actually made like behind the scenes reels back in the day, so you can actually compare my behind the scenes setup from then to now. I think it's kind of interesting because the old shot, it has a lot more stuff on the desk, like there's so much more room taken up on my desk, but there's a lot less stuff in frame, you know, there's not as much going on in the photo, and it's a lot tighter of a shot. The newer one is a lot smaller of a setup on my table, but the picture has way more going on, shows a much bigger location with more details, from the birds to the sand, the waves, to the fence, to everything. I don't zoom in as much anymore, and I think my photos feel a lot less claustrophobic. Rest in peace, Figma Gon. You served me very well for the many years. You will be missed. Okay, so this next shot initially began, I was gonna have Archer and Lancer fighting. I even set it up and everything. I did the effects and lighting and composition. I did everything, okay? A whole 9 yards. But I don't know, this feels a little like there's too much going on, and like it was hard to give both characters the focus I wanted to without it feeling busy. And I just realized it was just a cool idea in my head, and I didn't really execute it well. You know, that happens sometimes. Even though I didn't want to use this version of it, I still had everything set up, and I liked the pose Lancer was in a lot, so I decided to do a shot of just that with everything exactly the same setup, same background and everything. I just found this on Google. I reframed it on the camera, and I moved these smoke effects up here to make the bottom part of the picture more interesting. I wanted a very tall photo. I don't remember the exact resolution of the shot, but it's taller than 4:3. I think this is a 2:3 shot right here. I also spent like a bit of time just like adjusting the moon a bit. I wanted it to match the composition really nicely. And here's a time lapse of me just continuing to adjust the camera, then adjusting the moon, and then adjusting the camera, and then adjusting the moon. It's a vicious cycle I went over and over again. This month I got really into these basic 2 light setups. I used them a few different times. You'll see what I mean throughout the video. But honestly, I'm not a professional. I don't know fuck all about anything that I talk about. Like, I really am not a professional photographer. I kind of just throw shit at the wall, and sometimes it sticks, and that's what I post. Anyways, here is the photo that I came up with. I shot this specifically at a low aperture because it gives the background a really nice blur. Quick intermission. I'm gonna use a chunk of this video to just talk about manual camera settings, because I had a couple people ask me like what these numbers right here actually mean, so here's a segment on that. Right now, I'm just gonna talk about aperture or f-stop. I'll use those 2 terms interchangeably. Essentially, it's this little f4.0 number on this example. Pretty much when you press shutter on your camera, your lens opens up, allowing light to hit the sensor. This number indicates the size of that opening. The smaller the number is, the bigger the opening. The brighter your shot will be because you are literally letting more light in. So lower number means brighter photo, but it also means a sharper photo. Because when you raise your f-stop, you push light through a smaller hole. It literally forces the light to travel in a straighter path, making it hit your sensor more clearly. It's kind of fucking cool. So in practicality, all this means is the lower your aperture, the blurrier your background will be, and the higher your aperture is, the more stuff you'll have in focus. This is called depth of field, and here's a pretty good graph if you just want to like refer to what I'm talking about and visualize it. This is essentially it. I shot this photo specifically at f4.0, which is a very low aperture because I wanted a really blurry background here, but if I wanted more in focus, I would shoot at like f10.0 or something. After screwing around in Lightroom, especially with the dark shadows and the blurred background, it really stands out. I tried to style this shot after how the Ufotable Fate animes look. Ufotable does these like nice blurred backgrounds with these like bokeh lights and stuff, and I wanted to emulate that in a way. I made this shot a bit more purple, and I tweaked the reds a bit so his spear would stand out more. I used 4 very basic masks this time. First of all, one on his face to give it more clarity, and one at the bottom of the picture to dim it a little bit. I thought it was just a bit too bright. Then I made the sky a bit brighter, and then another mask on just the moon to make that even brighter than the sky. I thought that having a bright sky here would look nice, but especially the moon I wanted to stand out a lot more. But yeah, that's all for this one. Nothing too complicated here, but you know, there's nothing wrong with simple and clean, you know. I do think this could benefit from a much tighter crop though. Like, I think there's a bit too much in frame. It's a bit too tall of a shot. I think maybe 4x3 or just straight up a square photo would look a bit nicer. It was nice to do something with low aperture. I think the blur on the background looks nice, especially around the time of the month that I shot this. I think I was doing a lot of high aperture shots, so this was good just to get some variety going on, and I'm happy with how it turned out. So for whatever reason, I decided to pick up this pre-owned Figuarts Mace Windu on AmiAmi when I was doing my order this month. Initially, this picture just started out as a desk photo, but I decided to use that as a blueprint and bring it over to the setup and turn it into a proper photograph. Shout out to these Black Series Phase 1 clones. I army built them when they came out. The thought process for this type of shot is I usually just begin with a cool looking visual. You know, I frame something up on the camera, no setup around it, just some characters posed up doing something. And then I color in the blank spots like it's like a coloring book, and I build the setup around that initial composition. A good way of looking at it is the context and the scene can come second. First, I have to figure out the angle and what the subject of the photo is that I'm shooting. Like, I want to figure out what the core of it is before I build around it, if that makes sense. The setup I built here uses this play sand and these rocks. I'm trying to make it look like the Battle of Geonosis from episode 2. I set up a ton of lights to get everything looking nice and pretty, and I also set up this background image of the battle to like really contextualize the shot. Cause like when I think of episode 2 and I think of the Battle of Geonosis, because that's like the only memorable part of episode 2, this is the exact type of scene that I think of. I also went in and added those Poncheesy dust effects. This is just like the icing on the cake. Shout out to Poncheesy once again. His design for the dusties was so good that Bandai had to copy it and make their own version. True fucking story. When your digital camera takes a picture, your sensor fires off a bunch of little signals that measure the sensitivity to light. More signals means a brighter picture. ISO is how you adjust the sensitivity that your camera has to light. Having a high ISO is useful if you need a brighter shot
shot because you just can't get it brighter without raising your ISO. Like if there's a dark environment, like if you're shooting in a dark area, high ISO is great. But for a shot like this, I don't need my ISO to be very high because I'm in a studio with LED lights that I'm pointing at my subject. I'm controlling the lighting environment, so I don't need to adjust my ISO, because the problem is digital sensors and the signals they fire off are not perfect. So having more of them shows those imperfections more, and that creates a bunch of little dots on your image called noise. You can tell when someone's ISO is way too high because usually you don't want these little dots, they don't look very nice, and it makes for a less clean image. Unless that's what you're going for, typically just you want your ISO as low as possible.
Anyways, this is the shot that I came up with. In Lightroom, I wanted to shoot for like really saturated yellows and a lot of contrast and also a slight vignette. I want the light to look harsh and the shadows to look dramatic. I want this to be depicted as like an epic battle going on, you know? It was a really fun shoot. I don't do enough yellow shots that don't involve effects. Usually if there's yellow in my photo, it's from an aura effect or something. So it was nice to do something where the scene is just this warm color. And I like how the purple saber like stands out with the rest of the colors in the picture. But yeah, I think this turned out quite nicely. I do not like the background. I think it looks bad. I tried to do a digital gunship in the sky, and I should have just learned from last month that that doesn't look good when I do it on my monitor. I need a tangible ship. I made this exact same mistake in a very similar photo last month. Also, it looks kind of strange having the black smoke behind them when I have the white smoke on the ground. I don't know, it just, everything about the sky here throws the photo off, I think. I should have experimented with more backgrounds, and this just doesn't look that good in my opinion. But aside from that, I like pretty much everything else I had going on here. I want to do more Star Wars shots like this in the future with just a bunch of troops in some battlefield. I think this is a fun formula to do more shots like this with. It's a good like prefab idea. So, reoccurring collab on the show. This month I ended up doing another collab post with Diego, Super Saiyan 63, and Ray Sashi 2099. Last time we collabed for some Evangelion shots, and this time we decided to collab for something Pokemon related. It wasn't originally the idea, but it just kind of ended up working out that way, where we all did photos of Figma Red. So, it is a Figma Red collab right here. For my post, I decided to do a shot of Red on Mount Silver with a few of his pocket monsters just hanging out. I also wanted to use this as an excuse to try to do like a snow falling effect, which I'll get into in a minute. But yeah, pretty much the idea is I want Red standing at the top of this staircase with like snow falling around him. To create the like tundra environment around him, I chopped up this Broly movie diorama. I just cut it in half, and I used these hills at different parts of the picture. And I just filled the frame enough where it creates a good setting for the shot. And then to add some Pokemon, I'm using this shiny ass Jax Pacific Charizard. And then I added this Pikachu on the right. For the background, I pulled up some mountains. Like, I literally googled Pokemon Silver snowy mountains, and I used that in the background, whatever came up when I searched that. Okay, so for snow, I just use plain old flour for my pictures. Like, as you can see here is some other images I've done that in, and I sort of just spread it across the picture. But in addition to that, I would also like to create a snow falling effect around Red. And in order to get that very specific look I'm going for, I'm going to need to set my shutter speed to be very fast.
Okay, one more of these segments, I'm going to be talking about shutter speed, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the speed at which your camera is shooting the photo. When I show my camera settings, it's this little 1/60th number, for example. That is my shutter speed, meaning my camera shutter is open for a 60th of a second. So why does this matter? Well, any motion captured during that 1/60th of a second is going to be blurred. So having it be a slower shutter means more motion is captured. This is how you create motion blur. Refer to the graph. Also, another thing, the faster that you make your shutter speed, the darker your image will be, because it's literally just less time for light to be hitting your camera. So fast shutter speed means less motion blur and a darker image. High f-stop means a sharper image and a darker image. And lastly, high ISO means a brighter image and more grain. Those are your big three numbers. If you know what all three of these do, you can use your camera in manual mode, no problem.
So how does that help create a snowfall effect? Well, the idea is if I sprinkle a bunch of flour over the setup and I shoot at a 1 in 250th of a second, which is what I'm using here, it'll shoot the picture quick enough where it can capture the clumps of flour mid-air without too much blur, but just enough where it looks like it's being blown around in the wind. So I kind of just drizzled flour all over my setup a few separate times, and I used a remote to click shutter without having to move the camera, and I have the mini player pulled up on my monitor, and I made a bunch of takes like this where there's little bits of snow in the air, but not a ton, and then I just combined them all in Photoshop to make one single big composition with a lot of snow falling to create the effect I was aiming for. But yeah, explanation aside, I quite like how this turned out. I'm very happy with this. It was a kind of simple setup, but it was fun to experiment with making it look like it's snowing, and I do a lot of shit like this later in the month, so it was a nice like ripping off the band-aid type of shot to start doing these type of long shutter speed, or not long, fast shutter speed pictures. Ray came up with this really cool shot of just Red in like a park. It's like very green and warm, and he's got all of his Pokemon surrounding him, and this is sick. And here's what I like about this collab, because I did something similar to what Ray did, but mine was a lot more cold and blue, and it's at the top of this mountain, and his is like very green and warm, and they overall just have very different vibes to them, even if they're similar photos. And then Diego did something totally different as well. He did these black and white shots that look like they're from the Game Boy games, and his shots are of like White Hand and Lavender Town, and so, you know, there's a lot of variety, but it's all still of the same series. It showcases the different skills we have as photographers, and also the different things that the Pokemon series has to offer, as far as like aesthetics and locations and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm happy with how this project turned out. Shout out to Ray and Diego. I had a lot of fun working on this with y'all, and I hope to do more collabs like this in the future. So I was going through some old figures looking for something I haven't shot in a while, and I found this old Revoltech Alucard, and this guy is still so cool. Like old Revoltechs just have such a cool style to them, man. The initial shot was going to be him standing under the stained glass window, and I wanted to do it framed through the doorway. I thought this was a really neat idea, but I couldn't get it to look good. The composition, despite being very symmetrical, which is nice, it just looked so cramped, and as much as I like the idea with the doors, I think I can do this better if I put more thought into it. I think I need a wider angle as well, so I'm just gonna come back to this another time. But I do like how the red stained glass window looks. That's pretty fucking sick. So I went to bed and woke up with a new lust for life. Back to the drawing board, I decided to come up with something new using this setup. I ended up deciding on using a throne that I've had. I think this is a Mortal Kombat diorama. I never do any photos with it, but I think it would work really well for this. And Alucard looks pretty cool sitting on it. Then I added these Halloween decoration skeletons. I wanted to go for a kind of campy Halloween vampire-esque look to this shot, because, you know, Alucard is just a silly guy. I think it kind of works. I also grabbed this gold shiny cup from Chogokin Gilgamesh. I think the chrome gold adds some variety to the shot. The main lighting setup just consists of these 4 lights. Specifically, I wanted to cast a shadow on the right of the image and it to be really harsh on the left. And then to complete the look, I brought back the red windows from before. I think that just looks badass. I also framed the shot to be symmetrical like before, but now instead of using the doorway, it's using the throne. But yeah, after this went through a couple different phases, I eventually came up with a setup I'm happy with. I like how this picture turned out. In Lightroom, I made some slight adjustments. Main changes were the color wheels. There's a smidge of blue in the shadows, as well as some pinks in the midtones and some greens in the highlights. One worry that I have when I shoot like an all-stone diorama like this is that it will turn out looking way too gray. But I think here, giving the stone that reddish hue completes the aesthetic of the picture. I used 4 masks. First one just raises the shadows on his legs so it's not like too dark. The second mask makes the stone parts of the background just a little darker. The third one bumps up the clarity on his face a bit. And lastly, this one just darkens the skeleton to match with the rest of the shot a bit nicer, like the light was hitting him a bit too harsh. In conclusion, I like how this shot turned out. It's fun to look at, and it was nice to photograph an old Revoltech for a change. You know, I remember back in the day, everyone hated Revoltech and said they were super janky and like crusty old figures, but like then they changed a lot of their engineering choices, and nowadays I feel like they definitely did a good job of changing the community's perception of them. Like Revoltech used to be the most hated brand like of all time, and now everyone wants to make like hand posing reels to them with like Deftones songs, so like they definitely ran back their reputation. You know, Bandai actually fucking blows my mind. I have no idea why they didn't just start the Bleach line with this figure. Like, it's a more iconic look for the character, and it is a way better figure than the first Tensei Zangetsu Ichigo that they made. Like, it is literally just better. There's no way you guys got this much better at making figures in a year. You guys could have just done this from the start. For this shot, the goal is to remake that one panel of Ichigo first using his Bankai with the smoke and the cape flowing. In order to get the cape right, I actually just cheated. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't actually stretch that far. I took it apart and assembled it so it's longer on one side, and then I just taped the extra parts on with electrical tape, and that worked out pretty well. For the smoke, I'm using a mix of the Bandai smoke effects as well as the Poncheesy Dusties. I used a fucking camera battery in an accessory tray to hold up these front ones to get them in frame. As for lighting, I wanted it to look really bright, but I made sure to have a shadow on the left part of the shot. Specifically, I wanted darker colors on the figures to contrast with the bright effects and the bright background. Also, for the background, I actually just used the original panel, but like the colored version of it with the brown debris flying around. And that was essentially the entire first draft of the setup. And here's how it came out. It's definitely recognizable. It's a fine photo, but something is just really off, and I wasn't happy with this. You know, this made me realize just how important framing is to recreating a shot like this. So, okay, if we take the original panel and we divide it into a 3x3 grid, there are a few things I want to note, okay? First of all, Ichigo's body is only on the leftmost column of the frame. So for my picture, I think only a third of the shot should have the figure itself in it. Secondly, the cape stretches across the middle column and halfway through the third column on the right, the same with the sword. Thirdly, the middle square of the grid is just half the cape, and then from there, the top right of the picture is just the background. That creates a negative space where there's the figure on the left and not much else on the right, and I think that's really important to why this shot has the look that it has. It's like a yin and yang with the subject on the left half and an empty area on the right. And last point is that the top left corner of the square of the grid specifically cuts at Ichigo's side profile with him looking over his shoulder. Like, if you just grab that, it looks like a yearbook photo or something. Those four specific aspects of the composition I concluded are like what is the most important things to get right in recreating this. So I just used those rules as a guideline for reshooting the picture, and as you can see here, the figure is only on the left of the image. The top right of the image is just the background with the smoke effects and the TV screen creating that negative space, and the character's side profile is all that's in the top left corner, just like in the original. The only thing I struggled to frame correctly here is the bottom right corner, because the cape just wasn't long enough to fill that square. You know, it's supposed to fill half of the square, but I just couldn't get it to, so I settled for only a third, which is close enough, you know. The lighting's the same, the background's the same. It's essentially just the same photo, just reframed a bit. Over in Lightroom, the settings I used were pretty basic, though the sky was this weird teal color, so I made it more blue like in the reference. Also super low midtones and shadows because I felt the original shot was just too bright as a whole. I used 4 different masks here. One to boost the brightness in the bottom left corner of the shot. Another one to darken the red on the cape and make the colors less warm. This big one just makes the sky a lot brighter. And then lastly, to contrast with that bright sky, I made the black parts on the figure itself like really dark. Like, if you look at the reference picture, the black robes really stick out against the blue sky, and I think I accomplished a similar look here using the masks. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This was a fun shot to do. I learned a lot just from breaking down the composition of the original picture and recreating it. It is very satisfying when I'm recreating a panel or a scene and it starts to really resemble the thing that I'm trying to remake. It's like, oh shit, like it's all coming together. It's a good feeling, you know? This Mafex Dark Knight Returns Batman, this is one of the best figures ever. From the sculpt to the paintwork to the articulation, it's just excellent. Essentially, the shot is going to be this Batman posed up on the top of this gargoyle on a building, and I plan to add a rain effect that is similar to the snow effect that we did earlier for the red shot. For the background, I have this image of Gotham that I found on Google, and I adjusted it to match the shot. Kind of simple lighting here, just 2 white lights on the right here, and 1 accent light on the left. Like, all things considered, this is a really basic setup, just a building, a monitor, and a figure, but that red light, ooh, that's just the seasoning right there. That elevates everything. Also, I made the shot a square so that way Batman's cape like fills the frame a bit nicer here. I have this spray bottle of water, which I'll be using to make the rain by spraying it all over my expensive ass action figure. Essentially, I did the exact same thing as the red shot from earlier, setting my shutter speed really high and shooting a bunch of pictures while moving the setup around and spraying the water in. Though this picture picture was a lot harder to do. I needed to do more takes than the red photo, and I also had to shoot at a quicker shutter speed, and it was tricky because the water kept getting all over the figure, and I had to worry about that between takes and how that would work with combining them later. It was kind of a messy process, but after many takes we did prevail, and this is what I came up with. It was like 60 photos in all, and I just combined them in Photoshop and then erasing parts to where it looks seamless. In Lightroom, I low-key made the shot worse. Like, the original picture looked fine. Maybe the shadows even looked nicer there, but I don't know. I wanted more blue. That's what my gut was telling me, and I always go with my gut, so I made it more blue. 3 masks. First one makes the eyes like a pure white color. Next 2 masks just darken areas of the background that I thought were distracting. Pretty much just uses gradients to cover them up. I like how this one turned out. It has a real comic booky feel to it, which is something I always worry about because I don't do enough comic book shots to just nail that aesthetic right away nowadays. So I was worried when making it, it would make it too much like an anime, but I think I got it right here. The rain turned out better than I was expecting. I kind of thought this was going to be one of those ideas that doesn't work out, but after trying it, it actually worked out very well. I feel like sometimes this hobby can get a bit stale, and to prevent myself from falling into a rut of just shooting the same picture every single day, I try to innovate and try new stuff. It's things like this are exactly that. This is like something I haven't done yet, but there's always so much more room to grow. Like, while I love how this shot looks, it bugs me that there's such big water droplets on his face. That doesn't really look realistic. It kind of breaks the immersion a bit, but you know, that's just something to be careful of next time. For now, I'm happy with my honest best attempt at doing something like this. I feel like when it comes to Berserk photos, I lack a bit of creativity, and you know, it's partially the fact that for all the years I've been doing this, there were no good Berserk figures. But I do actually feel like when it came to shots of Guts fighting monsters or just standing there looking cool in a castle, I can only do that so many times before it gets repetitive. And even when I do have figures like the God Hand, for instance, it's like I only ever did one photo of the God Hand, and it's this one. And the reason why this worked so well is because like this is an iconic panel that I'm referencing, and it's just a cool looking visual. Aside from a few specific instances though, the God Hand don't do anything in the story, so it's hard to come up with photo ideas for them, you know? At least that's what I was thinking when I remembered that Slan does fight Guts. Like, he cuts her in half and puts a cannonball through her. So instead of doing just another shot of him chopping up random monsters or whatever, I can have him fight an actual named character. It's such a good photo idea, and I don't know how I haven't thought of this until now. Here's how the pose started out, and I will definitely say that at this stage it looks pretty good on camera, but it will absolutely get worse before it gets better. You'll see what I mean. First change I made is I swapped to using the Figma sword because it's smaller, more manageable, and I think it'll just look nicer for this particular photo. Ever since that EVA 01 shot from last month, I've been wanting to use the fake blood again for something, so this was the perfect opportunity. Slan has this really pale skin, so the blood stands out a lot, and it creates this cool wet look on the shiny black of Guts' armor and the wings, and it just adds a lot to the detail of the shot here. Both of these figures have a really nice finish on them, and the blood just looks awesome. Thankfully, it just washes off, but like, I did use half of the bottle. Shit got all over my hands. It looks like I killed someone. Also, I made the move away from the arm flying off. I thought it just looked a bit too cartoonish. The shot went through a lot of weird phases with different lighting and posing and even changing out lenses. In the scene, Slan has these tendrils that go everywhere, so to recreate that, I have this like fake Lego squid thing that I use sometimes. It has these awesome tentacles that work perfect for this type of thing. After a lot of reworking, I finally decided on this vertical composition. I think it does the best job framing both figures as well as Slan's wings and Guts' sword. The goal here was to make a very distinct visual, with Slan looking down trying to embrace Guts with the wings around both of them and her hand on the back of his head, and Guts in just like a pure rage, slicing her arm off and getting blood all over her hair and chest, and it's a really out there visual, and I kind of wondered if I was doing too much here, but I eventually concluded it's pretty in line with what you would expect from Berserk. Didn't drop it in dirt. Grow up, I didn't drop it in dirt. Here's the lighting setup. I put that light in the top right on a riser specifically to light Slan because Guts was blocking the light when I had it lower. Also added this red accent light in the back because it adds some much needed color to the shot, and I think it works really well with the red blood. Also, right before I took the photo, I sprayed a bit more blood on the sword and just over where the cut is happening, so so it would look like fresh blood, because it would still be wet, it wouldn't be dried. But yeah, that is essentially the entire setup, and here's how the shot turned out. Very simple editing in Lightroom, mainly just a good crop because I shot this a lot wider than it needed to actually be. As far as colors and lighting are concerned, I wanted to bring out a lot of the richer details and the shadows and the colors on their skin. Also, one single mask here just to make the corners a bit dimmer. I decided this over a vignette because it makes a nicer shape for the darkness, I think. I like this shot. I think it's sick. It's a really distinct and striking image, and I think the colors turned out really nice too. It's a very complicated setup. It just stands out and it looks awesome. But I still can't help but think it's not good enough because it just looked way cooler on my desk than it does in the picture. I don't think I did this setup justice. When you have a setup like this with a lot of different moving parts between the two figures and how they're interacting and how they're posed and the blood and the wings and even the sword, it can just be tricky to capture everything in the camera as nice as it looks in person. But with that said, just to be clear, I still think this picture rocks. Like, the concept of this shot is a succubus lady with bat wings getting her arm cut off by a dude with an unrealistically large greatsword and blood spraying everywhere. Like, that photo idea is so fucking cool. If I were to half-ass that, I just wouldn't even post it, like, straight up. Like, okay, even if I think this shot looked cooler on my desk than it ended up looking in the photo, I tried so hard on this one. This is an extreme effort photo. Like, I was trying really hard to make this as good as possible. I wanted to make a collection of photos this month that I was really proud of, and this is a pretty good example of that. This is one of my favorites from the month. I really like this Figma casual saber, so I used her in the thumbnail for last week's video, but I've never done a proper photo. Did I really just say last week? Like, it hasn't been over a month? Something's wrong with me. Anyways, I've never used this Figma for a proper photo, so we're gonna be doing that today. This wooden Japanese style room is one of my favorite dioramas, and I want to use that for this shot. I started by adding these wooden sliding doors to the side here, and then I got to work filling the scene with Saber sitting at this table and eating some food. The goal for this setup is going to be a whole kitchen with a bunch of different foods and things. I want it to look like overly gluttonous, you know? I started by adding this counter and some other pieces of furniture to decorate the scene. When it comes to getting a whole bunch of props like this, they're all just 1/12 scale dollhouse accessories. Like, they're cheap and you can find pretty much any prop if you just search, like, for instance, like syringe 1/12 scale dollhouse accessory. Boom. You have 1/12 scale syringes that are perfect for photos. To begin adding the food, I put these little pans with different meals in them, and then from there I just kind of started filling shit. So far this is looking like a pretty nice start to the picture. Then I decided I wanted to add other characters to bring a bit more life to the photo, so I started with Sakura over here on the left, and then I added Shiro and Rin as well, and the extra figures sure do a good job of like filling the photo and just making it look a bit more like a lively area, you know? Very easy lighting on this shot because I really suck at lighting a bunch of shit. Like, if there's a bunch of props or a bunch of crowds and figures in a photo, I kind of suck at lighting that.
You know, Diego actually did a photo recently kind of like this with like a lot of food and characters on screen, and he made the food look really delicious. Like, the lighting here is really excellent considering how many different things are in the photo that he has to light. Diego, if you're watching this, please send me your BTS, okay? I love you, bro. Please send me your behind the scenes. I need that for the October training arc, okay?
Next, I decided I wanted to adjust the angle of the shot just a tad, and after doing that, I pressed the shutter button, and we're good. Here's how it turned out fresh off of the cameras. This time I think I did a pretty good job showing off the scene, but I don't like how the colors look particularly. That was something I tried to correct in Lightroom, but I don't know if I really got it, you know? I made a bunch of little tweaks to colors and stuff. I really tried to fine tune it to look just right, and I even made this super complicated mask, and deadass all this does is change the saturation up a bit on the food because I don't think the food looks really appetizing here. This was a really fun setup to do, and I think I got a good composition. Like, I think the frame itself is good. I just don't think the lighting and the colors are great here. I have no idea what I'm doing trying to light this type of scene in this type of photo, and it shows. I really think that this photo looks kind of ugly. I still like it though because it was a fun concept. It's a fun photo to set up, so I do like it. I wanted to post it, but to me it serves as a really good reminder of specifically what I need to work on going forward. So yeah, I like it. I just wish it was a bit more fun to look at, if that makes sense. Vinland Saga is one of the most beautiful manga I have ever read. It is such a powerful story that just... Oh, my fucking laptop died when I went to record this shit. Fuck, dude. Anyways, Vinland Saga is a genuinely beautiful story that makes me want to be a better person. Like, it doesn't matter that my laptop died, I have no enemies. And recently, the series ended with its 220th chapter on July 25th, and immediately after reading, I decided I was gonna go shoot something to post the next day in tribute. I didn't want to make anything too overly complicated, and it's one of those things where I understand why Figma would make the prologue version of Thorfinn, but I would have liked any other look for this character pretty much. At least they made up for it by making a 10 out of 10 figure though. This Thorfinn is like perfect. Like if I had a list of perfect figures, he's going in there. This is a top 10 figure of all time for me. Two things though, when the last chapter came out, I kept seeing this art on Twitter, and I knew I wanted to make something that looked like an image you'd see in like an art book or on the cover of something, and this is a good basis I'm thinking. I also wanted to include like a quote in the photo. The main thing I want to do with this photo is I had picked up these leaves outside, and I'm just gonna drop them behind the figure and shoot at a high shutter speed, like a fast shutter speed, so it captures them falling midair. The lighting for this shot is about as simple as you can get, and I'm shooting with my 200mm lens, just zoomed all the way in on the figure. The actual shooting of this photo became just a cycle of dropping the leaves and then picking them back up, and then dropping the leaves again and picking them back up again, rinse and repeat until I had enough takes that I was happy with. And then a pretty easy process of just throwing them together in Photoshop. And then I moved over Lightroom to just to color correct everything, like very basic adjustments, mainly wanted it to be brighter and less saturated. And to finish everything off for Instagram, I went back over to Photoshop, I added this quote in low opacity text, and I put white bars to avoid Instagram cropping, because you can, like we talked about earlier, like Instagram sticks with 5:4 aspect ratios. For some fucking reason. I don't really do quotes over a shot like this, but here I specifically wanted to do a quote because it represents the themes of the story, and this post is a celebration of the story ending. I think it works out kind of nicely. This is one of those pictures that was just like a fresh inspiration I had from reading. Like I woke up this day and had no intention of doing this photo. It just kind of came to me. So yeah, just go read Vinland Saga. It's a very wonderful story. I remember like 5 years ago in a Foosh video, Robo said this Mafex Boba Fett was like the greatest figure ever. So now that I'm back on the Star Wars figure rot, I decided to finally pick him up, and man, he is such a good looking piece. Like I have issues with this figure, okay? But none of them are aesthetic. Like there are so many details and bits of weathering and damage. It's an impressively sculpted and painted figure. It looks like it jumped straight off the TV screen. It's kind of a shame though, because despite being so pretty, he just can't pose for shit. Like the articulation is so bad. But to be fair, all Boba Fett really does is stand around and look cool, and the figure pretty much does the same thing. So one thing that is inexcusable though is this rangefinder. It is so egregious. It won't stay up. It is loose, and it's crooked too. Like I don't know how Mafex fucked it up this bad. I would rather it doesn't even move than be loose as shit like this, because at least then it's not an inconvenience. I do like him though, like just based on the paint job alone, this is gonna be the Boba Fett I use for my photography. I also picked up this miniature Slave 1 ship, or Boba Fett Starfighter, to use as a background piece. Essentially the idea is I put the figure in the foreground and I fudge the scale to make it look like it's flying in the background. I started by just setting the figure up on the camera, and then I framed the shot and I put the ship behind him. Kinda goated that a Figma stand does just plug into the bottom of this ship. I added these eye-pop design buildings. They're meant to be like miniature skyscrapers, but here I'm just using them as like metal debris. Like I sometimes I just be putting shit in the background of my scenes and seeing how it works. And then over on my computer, I set up a background behind the figure with this orange Bespin sky. Also, I removed these ships from the background in Photoshop, and I positioned the image so that the sun would be in the top right-hand corner of the frame. Just to add to the scene a bit, I put these troopers walking in the background. The lighting for this picture is very simple, just 2 lights, and I was very careful in how I set them up with how I wanted like the shadows to be cast and everything. The idea is the sun in the top right is the main light source shining down on the scene, and that's why I positioned the lighting to be so harsh on the right side of the figures. Little things like that can take a basic setup like this and really elevate it and make the shot feel so much more believable. I touched on this a bit in the last video, but for figure photography, there really is like a magic where you have these little plastic figures and scenes, and your job is to bring them to life and put them in stories and context and make them look like more than just like a toy on your desk. And my philosophy beyond that is that you get there by doing little things like this lighting, for example, to make the shot feel more grounded. Like, it just makes sense in the context of the story of my photo. This is not a monitor. This is actually the sky, and that is actually the sun. And so my lighting should follow the rules of where actually the sun is being positioned. If the lighting doesn't obey how the scene is set up, I get like a narcissistic injury where the photo just loses all believability. It's more fun when it makes sense, if that makes sense. In Lightroom, I made sure to make the shot warmer, and I really wanted to bring out the highlights, just a lot of contrast, just tons of contrast. Okay, so 3 masks for this one. One for the subject, making them a bit brighter. One inverse mask of that, just to make everything that wasn't in the previous mask have noise reduction. And lastly, one gradient coming from the top left corner, excluding the subject from the mask, and all that one does is darken the corner to make the rest of the image pop a bit more. It gives the sun and the sky a bit more room to shine. Overall, this figure is pretty cool. I think I did a good job capturing the details on him, because like when I think of the original trilogy, I think of sleek sci-fi ships and armor covered in dirt and grime and look like they've been used. And this figure really captures that style. It also helps that, you know, Boba Fett is just a cool looking character, but either way, the goal was to make a cool character portrait and do something neat with like the mini scale ship in the background, and I think I accomplished that goal. Though, I think it would have been cool to do some storytelling with like the troopers carrying like Han and Carbonite in the background. That could have been neat. I don't know, but that is an idea that I could have messed with. So I think I tried like 2 or 3 times to recreate Gon's Ja-Janken with the Figma, but I don't know, each time something always just went wrong. The figure is just kind of tricky to pose, and I could never get the effects to look right. Like, it shouldn't be that hard of a pose to hit, but the Figma kind of fucking sucks. But now, in the big 2025, we have the SHF, which poses like a charm, and even comes with effects specifically to do this, so it's time. I'm gonna be basing my shot mainly off of this one art that I saw, and I thought it looked awesome. I like how they did the effect for him charging it up with like the swirl. First things first, I put Gon in front of this city ruins diorama. I really just needed a filler background because most of the shot is just gonna be the effects. I set up the camera, making this a square shot, zoomed in on the figure. I want Gon to really fill out the frame here. Then I went and grabbed these yellow wind effects. These are bootlegs of the Bandai ones. You could find them on eBay and AliExpress as long as you're okay with side effects such as lead poisoning. Here's how the wind looks in frame. You know, the real black magic that no one talks about is that if you don't want to, like, have a stand holding an effect up, you can just do it with your hand. Like, you can genuinely just hold that shit up and then hit the shutter button with your other hand. Then, to emphasize the effect and add some more color, I put these fire effects from Storm Collectibles Terry in the background. Always like to stack my effects like this. Like, even though it only looks good from one angle, it adds a lot more color to the effect, and it makes it look more detailed. And really, the only angle that matters in your photography is the one you're shooting from. Like no one is getting this ugly side profile, so it doesn't matter. Also, part of the way I have everything set up is I just stick them into the foam, and I even have this sword here as a pin holding the effect into the foam because it wouldn't stay in place. I'm using 3 lights on this shot. One up in the top left up here, one orange accent light on his back, like the effect is shining onto him. And lastly, I have one in the back here right behind the effect, which is actually going to be on screen in the final picture, which I don't do very often. Usually I try to keep my lights out of frame, but here I just liked how it looked a lot. But yeah, that's essentially the setup. So I held the top effect up to complete the frame and hit shutter at the same time. And here is how the initial shot turned out. In post, I did some minor lighting tweaks and I edited the colors to be slightly cooler. I also bumped the highlights and clarity all the way up to emphasize the effect better. The masks on this one were pretty important. The first mask makes the entire background way brighter and more yellowish, which I think is pretty necessary. The second mask separates Gon from the background and makes the colors on him cooler and increases the contrast. These 2 smaller masks both just adjust the highlights on the figure, making his hands brighter and his back a bit dimmer. And lastly, this mask increases the clarity on his eyes. All these kind of work together to just separate Gon from his effect, like make those look different from one another. I think it makes the effect stand out better. You know, this shot was a fun time because it's been a solid minute since I've done one of these pictures with just a bunch of bright effects around a figure. Like, I used to do these all the time, but I feel like I haven't done one in forever. And also, this is such an iconic anime main character attack. It was nice to finally, like, check this off the bucket list, you know? Okay, so I have a ton of these little Pokemon figures that Bran keeps sending me, partially out of the kindness of his own heart.
And like, I get it, bro, trust me, I understand, like, he just wants that shit out of his house, and I get it too, like, I be sending him tons of random fodder that I just want out of my home. But now I'm stuck with these, so I might as well photograph them. Shout out Bran, that guy is the GOAT, okay? Me and him were the greatest Counter-Strike duo of all time, okay? That's real.
So good. Oh. Today I want to photograph this little Mimickyu because I quite like how this little guy looks. So I got him sitting on this hotel diorama in front of the door. Same door I used for this Michael Myers shot from last October, by the way. I decorated the scene with trash and shelves and knocked over chains and books and all sorts of odds and ends. I had these boards as well as this wall gate thing closing the scene off. You know, I want my setup to be contained, it shouldn't just go on forever. Then, back to the blood spray from the Berserk shot, I wanted to coat the figure and the scene here with just gore. And that looks pretty great. Two more things, I added this smoke coming through the door, wanted it kind of to look like mist in a haunted house. Also added this extra orange light coming through the door to light the mist. And here's how it looks out of the camera. I ended up tweaking the shot quite a bit in Lightroom. First thing I did is a 4x5 crop because I genuinely do think it looks nicer. It just kind of added bonus, it doesn't get cropped by Instagram now. Also added more saturation and I made the blood a vibrant red color. 3 masks here. 2 of these are gradients used to exclude the subject and adjusting the top and bottom just to be darker. It's kind of like a vignette, but also kind of not because it's just the top and bottom. Also 1 big splotch on Mimikyu's face just to make it clearer. It was a pretty cool shot just to get accustomed to shooting these small Pokemon figures. I believe they're called Scale World. It's weird because you don't have to pose them at all. You kind of just build a scene around these unposable little plastic guys. It's fun. Okay, so the idea was I wanted to do this one art from the Fate Stay Night visual novel with Rin standing on this building with the lens flare behind her. I'm gonna use the 2.0 Figma with a custom coat that I acquired off this guy on eBay. For the building diorama, I'm using this 78 points building, and you know, this is like the 78 points diorama. Like when I think of his dioramas, I think of this one, it's a classic. Setting everything up, and we're for sure getting somewhere with this. I added this tower in the background with Archer standing on it. It's not really an accurate detail, but I think it's a nice addition to the picture. Next thing to tackle is that light in the background. To do a lens flare the way I want to, I'm probably just gonna have to edit it in Photoshop, but I still want a real tangible glowing red light in this picture. I think that would just be a good like thing to do. 4th of July was last weekend. Yeah, that's how long this video took to come out. So I grabbed one of these red glow stick bracelets and I stuck it to a gray tube which I stood up in the background, and I also added this water tower to really complete the scene and make it look like this rooftop in the city. That was one thing I used to always love about old ACBA photos, is there's always a water tower. They always had those. I think it's so sick. And then I added this red LED light behind to create this red accent that you see in the actual art, as well as these other white lights to balance everything out and make sure everything in the shot is nicely lit. I added this night sky background that I found on Google, and I lowered my aperture super low to blur everything out of focus. I think this light looks more convincing the lower my aperture is. And then to make the accent light a bit harsher, just for good measure, I added a second red light over here on the right. Before I added the lens flare, let's do some color correction in Lightroom. I wanted less shadow, but darker blacks overall. I also adjusted the magenta and the blue to make the sky be more of like a purplish color. And for the one mask I used in this photo, it's on the light in the back. I just wanted to make it ever so slightly brighter. For the lens flare, I grabbed this one I found on Google and I stretched it to fit the shot here. And I think it turned out looking nice. Overall, it was a fun shot to do, and it's been one of those pictures that I've been saying I'm gonna make for like a year now, and I just never did it, so it was nice to get around to it. Only thing I would have liked to do differently is perhaps I went a bit too hard with desaturating the photo, and I think it could look nicer with some more vibrant colors. Though I do also feel like in general, my photos look way too saturated more often than not, so I guess this is a nice contrast, you know? This is a figure made by My Custom Figures of Maka from Soul Eater. It's ridiculous to think that nobody has made a Soul Eater figure, like officially. It feels like the type of series that would definitely have an old Figma or Revoltech, but nope. There's nothing. I was looking through some old Soul Eater manga art when I saw this shot of Maka sitting on her scythe over the edge of a building, and I thought, wow, that is so cool. I need to make that. And I mean, obviously, this custom scythe piece is not going to be strong enough to hold the figure up, Only an idiot would try to do this by actually just balancing it. Like, in real life, this probably doesn't even work. If you had an actual scythe sticking out of a building, it would probably just come out of the building. Like, this doesn't make any sense to try to do without a stand. Right?
You know, it actually sucks whenever you break a custom part, because then you gotta message the person who made it and be like, hey, can you make me another one, please? And they're like, oh, what happened to it?
Anyways, for absolutely no reason at all, I'm going to be using a red handle for the scythe. That is definitely not a replacement because the other one broke. Okay, trust me. For the diorama here, I'm using this old 78 points Mirage City diorama, and I gotta say, this is like a top 3 78 points diorama. Like, I just love it. There's too many red brick buildings in this community. I love getting one that's like blue and orange bricks. It's super cool. I also set up this other rooftop with the head of the scythe sticking out of it. The method I'm using here to avoid the stability issues is to have Maka on a stand, and I'll edit it out later, and that works out pretty nicely and solves some issues, even if it was a pain in the ass to balance this. I added this other red building into the back, and I added some smoke effects and pawn cheesy dusties around here. This is one of those setups that, like, I turn around, I'm like sitting in my room and I look to my right and it just looks so satisfying. I love how it looks. I turned my TV on to pull up a background and it really wanted me to watch Titanic. I set up the moon, the big purple sky, very fun shot here. My lighting for this shot specifically got this overhead light at the top to act like a moonlight shooting down, and that's pretty solid looking. There are 2 more things to tweak though. First, I added a light inside the building to brighten up the windows with this warm like yellow color, and then I chose to brave the storms of slightly reposing Maka, which was a pain in the ass, but after much blood, sweat, and broken parts, and also tears, I came up with a shot which I am very satisfied with. Here's how it turned out before editing. I did 2 projects to edit this one. Here's the first draft with the majority of the edit. Very basic bitch light edits, a lot of saturation. I went for some warmer colors on the color balancing wheels, and a lot of masks on this shot as well, so I'm just gonna speed through them. Bottom one brings out the blacks and the coats and the shoes like I did on the Ichigo shot earlier. One bumps the clarity up on her face, one to dim the light at the top of the picture, and one on the eyes of the moon to make it brighter. And lastly, one on Maka herself just to dim the highlights on her because I thought she popped out a bit too much here. After all those edits, I thought I was done, but then a few weeks later I looked at it a bit harder and decided to open it in another project. I made a crop a little bit tighter, the square just didn't do it for me, and I went a bit harder with the purples and made it a bit darker. And then this isn't even an edit in Lightroom. On my phone, like on my fucking phone's like built-in gallery app, I lowered the saturation just a tad. And yeah, that's the final version I ended up posting. In conclusion, kind of a tricky shot to make, but I quite like how it turned out. Soul Eater is awesome, and I do hope it gets actual figures one day, but for now, this custom will do. Shout out my custom figures, shout out Tots, shout out 78 points, and shout out my mom. My mom is pretty cool. So okay, this video took long enough to come out that I made it to August 1st, which is apparently Spider-Man Day, and I was seeing a lot of cool Spider-Man pictures on my feed, so I decided to make something. I want to have Spider-Man right here on these buildings. The Spidey I'm using is the Mafex 075, which is still my favorite 1/12 scale Spider-Man. I've had him for years, and he's sort of just perfect. I know they keep reusing this body, but I still love the original. I set up the shot with these other buildings and water towers and things, and the goal of this shot quickly became making something symmetrical. I have Spidey in the center, the water tower on the left, and the building on the right, and the bottom roof comes up exactly to this line. I continued to move stuff around and adjust and try new angles, and I was originally going to do a monitor in the background, but I eventually decided to go with a printed image I have. I think this is from a NECA building diorama off the top of my head. I think that's where this came from. I ended up going with a lower angle that's a bit zoomed in because I wanted the roof he's standing on to take up the bottom third. The water tower and the rooftop both come out a third, and just everything about this picture is thirds. Also, really harsh lights for this picture. I wanted the sun to be burning Peter's back, so I have this desk lamp pointed directly down here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not my most ambitious picture ever, but for something I shot on a lazy afternoon before work, I'm fine with this one. This was also a fun composition experiment, getting everything to be symmetrical. Though looking back at earlier drafts of this photo, I kind of wish I had tried to stick with a wider angle shot. It would have been a fun challenge to keep a symmetrical composition with a wider angle, because like the whole reason I zoomed in was to make it easier to line up, but it could have been less claustrophobic and cooler looking if I zoomed out more. But hey, at least I got this up on time for Spider-Man Day, not like 2 weeks late like I did for May the 4th last month. That Alucard shot earlier got me in the mood to photograph some more old Revoltechs, so I went and got that Vash from Trigun out of storage, and talk about a figure that just like is dripping aura and hype moments, okay? They don't make him like this anymore. It may be a nightmare to pose, but he looks awesome once you get him posed, which is the quintessential Revoltech experience. I'm taking inspiration from this cool gif from the original Trigun. Gonna do a desert with like the sun in the background. So I got to building that desert using a mix of fake play sand that you can get on Amazon. If you search like kinetic sand, it'll come up. It's very good for photos. I've talked about this a few times. It just looks like real sand and it's easy to clean up. I also have these like fish tank rocks that are like a tan color, and those work really well with the sand to make an effective looking desert area. After getting everything set up, that looks pretty cool. Makes for a very nice landscape here. Now onto the other part of this shot, which is the sunset. So to make this, I pretty much just took the original shot and overlaid my own yellow circle in Photoshop, and I adjusted it to match. Like the background is literally just a red and orange gradient, and I pretty much just took the eraser tool and erased parts of my circle to make it look like clouds, and then I applied Gaussian blur over all the shapes. And I know this looks fucking stupid, but just trust the process, okay? It's definitely a weird looking setup, but with the lights off and in the camera, I think it does the trick. As you can see in this video, I have 4 total lights, one on the right and one on the background, and then 2 desk lamps on the left. I wanted harsh lighting on the left side near the bigger sun, and some shadows on the right side. And then lastly, to create some nice ambience, I pulled out my smoke machine and kind of just sprayed it across the scene. And here's how it turned out. The orange is a little bit strong, though in Lightroom I made it more red. And okay, here's the thing. I'm currently showing you the Lightroom project that I have currently in Lightroom, like for what I have here and the settings that go with that version of the photo, but I actually didn't end up posting this one. Like here's the one I actually ended up posting. It's called Vash Sunset Number 6, okay? This is the final draft of the photo, and I don't have the settings I used for this one anywhere. I guess I just kept editing it and then ended up going with an earlier exported draft of the photo. I don't have the settings for the final one, I'm sorry, but you can kind of see what I was going for. The main difference between this and my other Lightroom draft is that this one has a more red maroon look to it, and it's less pink. To be honest, I liked this shot a lot when I took it, but I wish I went for a harsher light on the figure. I think that would match the aesthetic of the old Trigun anime a bit better. And I think I should have applied some more noise reduction to the face. It's a little bit grainy. While I am happy with the colors and the pose and the background, the final look of the shot as a whole I think looks good. It still just feels a bit unfinished. I didn't really cross my T's and dot my I's like I usually do. This next shot is actually a pretty old photo that I skipped putting in last month's video, so that's why I still have the white floor set up in this one. So I grabbed this Black Series Starkiller. I got him for a pretty good price, all things considered, even with the deluxe accessories. Force Unleashed is a fun game where you get to play as a grossly overpowered Force user, and you can kill random stormtroopers in all sorts of fun and creative ways. And I wanted to do a figure photo recreating that. Specifically, I'm grabbing most of my inspiration from this cover art for the game. Anyways, the idea is to have this scene in a hallway, and in front of him I'll have these 2 troopers getting thrown around. This is one of those photos that looked super cool on my desk, and when I was thinking about taking it, especially after adding a few more stormtroopers in the back to fill in the blanks, one guy fighting a bunch of nameless army build henchmen is a classic ACBA prompt in my head. I should do more of these, it's one of my favorites. But after I got past the initial like coolness factor of everything going on here, like I ran into a a ton of issues when it came to getting everything situated and looking good on the camera. Like, this was a real pain in the ass to make look as good as I wanted it to look. I did eventually come up with this shot, which I liked, and then I went to light everything, just brightening all around through the transparent parts of the diorama. But god, everything just kept falling over. This shit pissed me off so damn bad. I just had to keep reframing everything over and over and over again, pushing my boulder up the hill. There were a few different drafts of this which I kind of liked, but eventually these got scrapped and I decided on this very specific take. I like this one the most. I cropped it a tad and I decided I was going to edit this in Lightroom. Really, the shot needed to be cooler, more saturated, and have more contrast. It's arguably a bit too blue, but I think it kind of works with the force lightning. Like, it sort of makes sense. I masked the corner here a bit to be even more blue and match with the rest of the scene. I don't know why it was so off. I did two things in Photoshop. First, I removed this stand because I can't be caught dead with a figure stand in my picture, dude. And I also made the lightsaber glow, though honestly, I don't think I did a great job here. I've gotten better at editing these lightsabers. So then I added this logo in Photoshop, and yeah, that's pretty much everything. I think this is my favorite Star Wars shot I've done so far. I'm just a sucker for cool Star Wars hallways and shots with a bunch of troops fighting, and this is both of those things. It is tragic how that head sculpt is so bad that it kind of ruins the photo, low-key. Another thing is I do have a 10 to 18mm lens, which I could have tried instead, and maybe that would have made it a bit easier to frame the shot how I wanted. And I also do think the troops are a little bit too static for being flung around by lightning. I think I could have posed them a bit better. Overall, I probably could have tried a bit harder on this one, but I do like how it turned out. Even if I could see ways I could do it better, I am happy with this one. Like I said, it's my favorite Star Wars photo I've done so far. This next shot probably has the craziest difference between idea I started with versus how the final product ended up looking. So I recently acquired this Figma Red from Pokemon, and I used him in the collab shot earlier, but aside from that, the first shot that I decided to make with him was this wide shot with Charizard taking up most of the frame, flying at the camera. So I set up everything on this grass base and got started. I experimented with a ton of different stuff in the scenery with smoke and dust, and eventually removed all the extras. I thought it kind of distracted from Charizard, and I also tried using a Pokeball on a stick to make it look more interesting. That didn't work. Overall, the first draft of this shit went absolutely nowhere. It was a total dumpster fire, and here's the best photo I came up with. I don't really like it. I acknowledge it looks kind of awesome with him flying at the camera, so I put it in a throwaway shots post, but overall, this was a scrapped idea. So it was back to the drawing board, and I decided to completely strip back what I was doing. I really liked the idea with the Pokeball flying through the air, so I decided to do a shot focused around just that thing that I didn't end up doing. So I set up this little shot here with Red throwing the Pokeball at Bulbasaur, shooting from below with the camera pointed up at the scene. I added these greens and trees and this log to the background. I changed the sky. I'm now using this frame from the Pokemon anime, and I have the ball on this piece of bendy wire to hold it up. I'm just gonna Photoshop that out later. 4 lights set up here spreading across the entire shot, and yeah, that's essentially it. I made sure to do 2 takes, one with and without the ball. That way I can Photoshop it out later, just a bit easier. Also, I did this extra slide where he like catches Bulbasaur. And after a bit of Photoshop, here's how the shot ended up looking. Honestly, all I changed in Lightroom was I made the colors a bit more vibrant, and I messed around with highlights and shadows, and I tweaked my reds, greens, and blues a bit. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This shot turned out pretty nicely, though in retrospect, I could have spent some more time in Lightroom and made it look a bit nicer. I would argue the colors are kind of ugly with my highlights being so bright, and it's a bit too blue. I think this shot probably should have been warmer, and it really doesn't help that the shot isn't contextualized super great. It's kind of just a few trees, some shrubs, and like a blue background. And usually I do a better job of showing the scene and like showing a location where the action is happening, and I just didn't really do a great job of that here. But it was fun to shoot some Pokemon stuff regardless. This month, I've been trying to dust off cool figures that I just never use for anything, and I think the Portal 2 Figma are probably the best example I have of that. My issue with photographing these guys is that Portal levels just have so many unique elements, it's hard to make a scene that makes sense for Atlas and Peabody to like be in. Like, it's hard to contextualize that. But I figured I would at least try, so I do have this graded like thing I could use as a floor. It kind of would fit into Portal. And I also feel like the Death Star walls I have been using for Star Wars photos, they kind of look like test chambers, so I figured I would give that a try. The shot I really wanted to do is the Portal 2 cover art, or at least that's the goal, is to like reference that artwork. So I made what is essentially just a giant Jenga tower out of diorama walls, which by the way, they are not meant to be used this way, and it is incredibly fragile and damaging to my dioramas, and I am just a sick fucking bastard for doing this. The idea is to have Peabody jumping over and then have Atlas on the ground. I decided on holding Peabody with a Figma stand, and I'm just gonna like straight up hold this shit with my hand. I added a head crab and some wires to just detail the scene a bit nicer. To light the shot, I put LEDs behind all the transparent bits of the diorama. It spreads the light evenly and gives it a cool futuristic look that I was going for. I tried to be kind of random with how I used the walls, so that way it didn't just look like a Star Wars room, it looked different at least. Now that everything is set up, it was time to actually shoot the picture, so I held Peabody over the scene and clicked shutter on the camera, and here is where things get hard. I pretty much ignored doing the portals in the setup entirely because I just said fuck it, I'll do it in Photoshop, I can learn how to do that. But the issue with that is then I actually have to do it in Photoshop, and I kinda suck at Photoshop, so this was a truly miserable process, which I will spare you most of the details of. First things first, here's how the shot turned out. And then here are the Lightroom settings I used to adjust the shot and make it look a bit better. I did intentionally shoot it wider so I could crop it a bunch in this part of the process. And I used 3 masks to dim the 3 corners of the shot that I wanted to be a bit more hidden. Now it's time to add the portals. And this was a solid 2 hours of pulling my hair out because I am so dog water at actually editing photos. It's not even funny, dude. This shit was kicking my ass. Eventually, though, I came up with a method. Essentially, I made a rectangle that is a smart object. Being a smart object, it essentially just means I can edit it separately from everything else in its own project that will update in the original picture. It's kind of like a composite shot in After Effects, but for Photoshop. Then I lined that rectangle up with parts of the scene, going off various lines and details on the walls to get a sense of perspective. Then I edit the smart object to no longer be a rectangle, but now just be a portal shape. And because I aligned the rectangle with the perspective of the shot, all the rectangles will turn into portals, and it will make the portals align to the same perspective the rectangles were, and here's how that turned out. I think it looks good enough. It could definitely be better, but as far as what I'm able to do right now, this is the best I could come up with. I'm overall happy, just because Portal is my favorite game series of all time, and it feels good to make shots from a series that I like that much. I'm not the biggest video game guy, but Portal is one of my favorite things like ever. I love that shit. I love Half-Life, I love Portal, I love all the Valve games. Also, shout out to Good Smile because they saw my photo on Instagram and they reposted it on their Instagram account. So shout out Good Smile. I always love when they do these community spotlights. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Please make Figma Gordon Freeman. That would be the best figure ever, okay? That shit would be sick. They can give him so many accessories, all the different guns and shit that he uses. They can give him the crowbar. They can give him like the gravity gun. They give him like a head crab. That would be such a cool figure. So over the last month, I went to the movies to go see Superman, and you didn't ask for my opinion. This is not a movie review channel. But I thought it was pretty good, and I enjoyed it. It for sure got me wanting to shoot something with my Mezco Superman, which is the go-to 1/12 scale Superman in my opinion. This is one of those figures where Mezco's style, I think, works really well actually. I want to do a shot of Superman floating in a yellow sky with light rays being cast down all around him. So I set him up on this metal stand, and the background is really what's going to be carrying this shot with these beautiful clouds. I upped the contrast and rotated it a bit in Photoshop to get the look just right. For the lighting, I just used my 2 desk lamps. Specifically, I wanted a shadow on the left of his face to create a nice looking contrast. And once everything was set up and good looking, I brought out the smoke machine. The cool thing about using smoke here is it kind of blends into the clouds because light has to hit the smoke. So by having light shining on the smoke around the scene, it just adds depth and it makes the sky brighter. It doesn't even really end up looking like smoke as much as it does just look like a blur of light around the clouds. The goal here was to make something something that looks triumphant and powerful, and I think the smoke just elevates that. I ended up just editing out the stand and combining a few different takes I shot, and here's what I came up with before editing. For the colors in Lightroom, I just wanted it to be a very faded gold, like beige color. I didn't want anything to be super loud. The masks I'm using here add to that look. I got one brush mask around parts of the clouds, making them less saturated. And I also have these two masks that raise exposure in that corner. And that is all. I quite like this one a lot, mainly because of the background. I love how the clouds look with the light coming through. I do think I could have done a better job posing here, just because he looks a bit too stiff, and it's not really the figure's fault. I kind of just did a shitty job posing it. Like, I love this figure, but the cape doesn't really look good draped in front of it like I had. But I do love the aesthetic of this shot. You know, figure photography is the new punk rock. So I was watching the Finn Aiden YouTube video review on this Figma Tears of the Kingdom link, and it gave me a new appreciation of this figure. For whatever reason, I barely photographed him. I did this one shot, but I kind of hate it, and this new link is really good. Maybe I need to finish the video game, because I have like no photo ideas for him, but now I decided I wanted to do something after watching that review. The shot I want to do is him pulling the Master Sword from Breath of the Wild. It's kind of based on Breath of the Wild, but also just generally what that would look like, because I'm not going to have an exact recreation of that area. I have this little foam rock that I'm going to be using as the pedestal, and for the base of the shot, I have this patio. It kind of looks like the Cell Games arena, but that's what we're going to be using, and I have it raised up here above some grass that I decorated in front of the shot with some rocks. I think this creates some nice depth. I also added these trees and logs to make the scene feel less empty and make it look more like a spot in a forest. The tree is also on a riser back here to get it to the top of the frame. One really annoying thing about using trees like this is getting them to reach the top of your frame, because I can't do super wide stuff or even like kind of wide stuff with one of these in the background. It just doesn't work. And then next, to fill the top of the frame up here, I taped these leaves just hanging down. And for the background, I have this art from Breath of the Wild, which I pulled up in Photoshop and color corrected to be a bit more green. Oh, I also used my smoke machine to just add a bit of mist to the top of the shot here, even if you can't notice it. And I also changed the lighting setup a bit, and I added this new desk lamp kind of below the figure. And this is how the picture came out. I'm stupid and didn't center the shot, so I had to crop it. And in Lightroom, I did some minor tweaks, mainly just bring out the highs and also some color grading. You know, just really bring out the detail in the shot. I also added one single mask that adds a small shadow, and then in Photoshop, I did some touching up with content-aware fill. There were just a few like specks of like dust and just random shit, like this like blue foam sticking out that I wanted to remove. This is one of those shots that was just kind of simple and fun, and it was just a fun setup to make. I would have liked it if I got a way to make it appear more like there's like light rays hitting the sword. That would have completed the shot. So last minute, I low-key just did that with these two masks. One adds a radial gradient shooting a beam down, and the other adds little bokeh dots around the beam. It's kind of like an oval of light spreading out here of dots. Like, it's a very subtle change, right? But I think it elevates the shot quite a bit. And honestly, that really completes it for me. I want to experiment with more practical solutions, but this, for this particular photo, I think turned out pretty great. I just want to do an easy shot of Goku and Gohan just standing there, and that's what this shot is. Also a good opportunity to use this like Cell Games Goku head sculpt that I got from Custom Up. It's hand painted. This is such a cool piece to have in the collection. To start, I have these two big bright lights brightening the subjects and aura effects from behind, and I decided to move everything up onto this rock base. I also put in these Bandai smoke effects to add a lot to the picture. I think it's a really easy way to farm variety and depth in your photo if you just add these effects and you're good. For the background, I have these small buildings from iPop Designs, and then for the sky, I have this Dragon Ball like screenshot that I found on Google. And initially, I thought this was solid and worked, so I shot the photo, and then it hit me This kind of sucks for two big reasons. One, the sky is too green, and two, this Goku and Gohan don't really look like how I wanted them to look. I don't know. I also need happy faces for them, which I don't have, and I think if I want to recreate that original art, I just need to do it another day. So I removed Gohan and put some thought into how I wanted to adjust this to be. I made the sky more blue, and I shot it with just Goku. And here's how that turned out. I made sure to crop it a bit in Lightroom and also adjust the yellows and blues. Also, I made my highlights a bit warmer and my midtones a bit cooler, just like tweaking the color balancing till I was happy with how this shot looked. Then I used a mask on the sky, making it brighter, because in the process of making it more blue, I also made it darker. I also gave him brighter highlights on the eyes, and whenever you do an edit like that, where you edit the eyes on a figure, you know, you're kind of playing with fire.
Because when you look at an image of a person, one of the first things that you look at is their eyes. So you have to make it look natural, and I think some people make it look way too stylized, and personally, I'm not a fan of that. Like, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. Do whatever you want. It's your photo. But for me personally, I try to make it subtle. Like, my rule of thumb is that if you can't tell that it's edited without me showing you a before and after, then I'm doing something right. At least that's how I look at these things. I just like to raise the highlights a little bit, raise the exposure, just make it a little bit more eye-catching, but not noticeably edited.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much everything. Like, the goal with this photo was to make something very normal. I think it's kind of fun sometimes to make something simple just because you can. So that was the point of this shot, and I'm pretty happy with how it looks. Okay, so I want to do a shot of Saber using Excalibur. The main setup uses Chogokin Saber with a translucent yellow blade, as well as this Super Saiyan 2 Goku aura behind her. Also a fish tank diorama that I use as like a temple of sorts in a lot of my backgrounds. Really good purchase for $30. I added these white smoke effects and also this like blue fire effect that came with Chogokin Saber, and I think these all work together really well to show her like charging up the attack. As for lighting, to start I have these two desk lamps directly on Excalibur's blade, and then to light the aura effects I added this LED behind that also lights the sword, and it also lights another effect which I'll get to in a second. And okay, so you know, lately I've been experimenting with fast shutter speed shots to create all sorts of particle effects like rain and snow, and in Fate Zero, when Saber uses Excalibur, it's depicted with all these little gold particles floating around her sword, and I decided I wanted to do something similar here. This shot is going to be kind of like the red shot where I use flour as snow, but the goal would be to have my shutter shoot even quicker than that, so that way I can like really catch the flower as little dots in the air instead of them like blurred a bit like I did in the red shot. I want like straight up little like bokeh blur dots pretty much in the sky. I don't have a video of it, but I got the idea from seeing dust fall in front of my camera while I had this set up, and I was like, damn, that looks kind of cool. I wonder if I can utilize that. Essentially the process here is just grabbing a pinch of flour and then drizzling it across my frame and clicking shutter with my mouse right as it looks like it's in front of the camera screen. And then like all other shots I've done in this video that are similar to this one, I rinse and repeat until I have enough takes that I can combine into one big final composition. One thing I noticed when shooting these takes is that if I want it to look like blurred little circles, having the dots closer to the camera creates a very nice effect, because what's happening is I'm not actually shooting the flower here, it's too close to the camera, it's out of the focal range. Instead, what's happening is the light from the light in the back is hitting the flower close to the camera, and that light that is hitting my out of focus dots of flower is what the camera is picking up as like little bokeh particle dots, which is perfect. That's the effect I'm looking for. Sorry if that explanation was a bit too all over the place, but after combining a few different takes, this is what I came up with, and I love how it looks. I think the effect with the flower turned out way better than I thought it would. And then in Lightroom, as you can see, I tried to make the shot colder and more purple, and I also wanted my yellows to pop a bit more. There are a lot of the big changes here actually came from masks that I used. First, I have this big gradient to make the sky brighter and more saturated. Then these two masks above it make the blue effect pop a bit more. I felt I didn't do a very good job lighting it, so that's what that's for. And then I have this mask on her face for a slight edit, making the eyes brighter. Above this is a very minimal highlight adjustment on the entire figure. I just felt it was a tad too dim, so I made it a bit brighter. And last but most importantly, I have a glow on the blade, making it have that like perfect bright glow, and and also making the particles closest to the sword appear more gold as well, like they're all floating toward the blade. I think this shot is a really good example of mixing practical effects with digital effects and just using all the tools at my disposal to make the best photo that I can. Small nitpick though, I wish I lit the building in the back of it better. It just sort of blends into the sky here. Bleh. But yeah, otherwise, I love this shot. It was a very successful experiment. So this video took long enough to make that not only did SHF Gon release, but so did SHF Killua. Like, while I was working on this video, we got through 2 separate monthly orders from AmiAmi. And we would have got through a third if they weren't holding my package currently because of all this shit going on with the tariffs. Anyway, the world falling apart before my eyes aside, the first thing I wanted to do with this figure is something with him and Gon. My favorite part of Hunter x Hunter is Gon and Killua's friendship. A lot of these shonen manga give the main character a best friend, but in Hunter x Hunter, it's actually endearing. It's a very good depiction of 2 friends going on adventures and learning from each other. It's really something special. After skimming through the manga a bit, I decided on recreating these 2 pages. I want to do the scene from the very start of the series where Gon and Killua first meet, and second, I want to do this page from a lot later on when Gon says he's glad he became Killua's friend, and Killua thinks to himself that he's the one that should be grateful to have met Gon. This is such a heartwarming moment in the story, dude. I remember this page was like pulling at my heart when I first read it. Okay, starting with the Hunter exams page, I got Killua posed with his skateboard from the Figma. For these pictures recreating manga pages, I want an all white background. I have a light box with white paper and an overhead light that you'll see in a second, and when done correctly, it creates a nice infinite white void background, which is great for doing these type of things. During this scene, Gon and Killua have their numbered tags that they wear during the Hunter exam, so to recreate these, I had a hole puncher on some masking tape and I wrote the numbers in with pen. It's kind of scuffed, but I would say it has charm to it. Like, technically they should be white, but there's enough white going on in this photo. I don't mind the beige color. Okay, so everything's set up, Gon and Killua, under the light in the white background, it's time to start shooting. For this main shot of them walking, I did 2 takes with each of them in focus. Knowing I'm gonna crop and format everything to look like a manga panel, I shot all these pictures with a lot of empty space around them to make it easy to edit. I then switched to my 200mm lens to get these crispy portrait shots from far away of their faces. In Lightroom, I made a preset to use the same settings for every shot for this picture series thing. It essentially just consists of bright whites and saturated colors for everything. And to really tie everything together, what I do is I make a mask of the background and then I feather it around the subject so it sort of fades into just a pure white color, and it gives the immersion of this is just a blank white background. I want a perfect #F color to the background. Like, if it doesn't blend into light mode on whatever app you're looking at my photo in, I'm doing something wrong. I find the best way to achieve that is a mix of a real bright white background with good lighting and then brightening up the edges later with a mask. I got these 2 separate shots of Gon and Killua walking. I'll edit them together. I had to fake it because Killua is way too far back in the original panel for me to do it tangibly, so I had to cheat here. Very simple process in Photoshop. The main part of this page is easy to edit together because of the white backgrounds all blending together. It looks very nice. As for the text, I'm using CC Wild Worlds, which is the font Viz uses, so if you want to make fake JJK3 leaks, there you go. Also using a baby blue colored rectangle here. I thought it would be nicer than just doing white like the reference, just for some variety. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. This was a fun little project. I'm trying to get back into doing panels. I got some projects coming up that I'll need to do a lot of paneling for, so this was pretty good practice. And it was cool to recreate some moments I like from this series now that it has figures that are actually fun to take pictures of, especially Killua, because man, that Figma was horrible. And the faces on these guys are perfect. They look exactly like the characters do in the source material. It's wonderful. In the same order as Killua, I got that new Golden Age Guts, very cool figure. I decided I would use this guy to redo an old shot. I did this picture with the Figma recreating that one panel where they find him after the 100-man battle, and I've always hated this shot. The custom cape doesn't fit, the colors are way too colorful, and I kind of just plainly think I could do it better nowadays, so I'm going to do it better nowadays. Now, right now, we're doing it right now. We're starting off, I got Guts lying against this 78 points tree and this 78 points diorama with an arrow from Figma Link sticking out of him. This pose was much easier with this guy than it was with the Figma, because that Figma Golden Age Guts is genuinely horrible. Over on the camera, I decided this time I'll do the shot in 4x3 instead of something square or vertical. Then I decorated the shot with these bodies as well as some random roots and weapons and stuff. Really just trying to detail this image out and make it look interesting aside from just the pose. The final picture is going to be super dark and dreary, so none of this will even matter, but you know, it's the thought that counts. I decided I needed more greenery in this shot, so I literally just like went outside and cut some with scissors, and I taped some leaves to either side of my tree here. Now for the background, and like, dude, just look how bad my desktop is. It's horribly unorganized, man, but you know what? At least I've been daily posting, you know, we've been getting by. I messed with a few different backgrounds. I accidentally made it too orange again, like this is supposed to be Berserk, not Fortnite. I did eventually decide on this mountain range, which I edited in Photoshop to be a bit darker. Here is the lighting setup. I wanted it to look like there was a gold ray of light hitting him through the trees. And here's how the shot ended up looking. In Lightroom, I went for something more green and dull. I kind of liked the greenish look, so I went for this olive color. I struggle with coloring Berserk shots oftentimes because in my mind, when I think of Berserk, I think of it as having this rich black and white inked manga art. And that screws me up because Miura did such a good job conveying detail through just black and white that when I have to think of it as a real thing that is tangible and has to have color, I don't really know what that looks like, but I at least aim to make stuff that depicts the grime that you see in a lot of Berserk manga art. Like this ugly ass olive slimy green color I think really works for this specific shot. 3 masks here, 2 are almost unnoticeable. Bottom one just makes the eyes slightly brighter, and the top one lowers the highlights on the face because it looked a bit too much. And then a big gradient layer at the top of the image making it brighter. I just thought the top of the picture was too dark, especially considering the light hitting Guts himself, so I brightened it. You know, I keep recreating old shots I did with a Figma when a new SHF comes out to replace it. It makes for a very vicious cycle of death and rebirth. I couldn't really decide on a crop for this one. There's the one on screen here and then this tighter one that I just ended up posting both of them. I'm not entirely happy with the color still. I think it doesn't perfectly match with how I've imagined this scene, but it does in fact match with other Berserk shots I've done, so I guess I have my own style to coloring these. I usually pick a single color for the shadows, like green here for instance, and then I just desaturate it and add a bunch of clarity, and that's how I get the look for my Berserk photos. Also, one nitpick is I wish Guts was more buried in his cape. It doesn't really look like he's injured here, it just kind of looks like he had a shitty day and he's kind of upset about it. Like, this is supposed to be him after he had a crazy battle where he fought a ton of guys, and it just doesn't really tell that story, I don't think. But otherwise, I think this shot turned out fine. I quite like it actually. I would even say it's pretty neat. I just have a few nitpicks, you know? So for this shot, I saw this really cool art on twitter.com and I was like, wait a second, I can do this. I really like the composition of this shot. I'll go into more detail later, but it does a great job showing scale, which means this is an excuse for me to photograph the Dying Action Unit 1, which is essentially the exact same figure as the Robot Spirits Unit 1, but it's 13 inches tall instead of being 6 inches tall, which despite being such a cool item to own, it also means I never get a good opportunity to photograph it because it's usually just more practical to shoot a smaller figure. Think about it like this, my canvas is only so big, but I can use a smaller brush, meaning I can apply more detail. That's the reason I don't fuck with 1/6 figures, because it's just not as fun to paint with a huge brush like that. But given the scale of this specific shot, the Dying Action is actually perfect for what I need to do here. To start, I have the Dying Action 01 towering over these iPop Designs buildings that are made for a 6-inch scale figure, but I just want to take a second to admire how good the original art artist is with using the rule of thirds in their work because it's such a good composition. Like, okay, going left to right, top down, O1's head gets its own square, the shoulder and torso get their own whole column going down the middle of the frame, then these birds get their own squares, the buildings at the bottom fill up exactly the horizontal bottom row there. This bird practically gets a whole spotlight in the middle bottom square right there, and then Asuka gets her own rooftop all to herself on the right middle square right there. This composition is so good because not only does it guide your eyes across the shot in a very natural way, but also the real estate taken up by Unit 1 in the image compared to everyone else shows the scale of the Eva really well. It really gives the immersion that this thing is huge. I gotta say, a lot of the time these dust smoke effects are really eye-catching parts of whatever photo they're in because they're bright and big, but here I just love how subtle they are. I'm using my more narrow lens set to 180mm zoomed in here to create the framing I want with Unit 1 in the middle and the buildings at the bottom. I want the contrast between the figure and the buildings to make this like upside down T shape in the middle of the image. Also, the sky background is this picture of the sky that I edited into Photoshop and added some clouds and did a whole process with editing to make it look how I wanted. The original image has O1 partially as a silhouette. I don't want to do that exactly. I still want lights behind the figure though, pointing at the camera. That way it's like there's kind of like a shadow there, but I don't want a total silhouette. But anyways, that's what these two desk lamps are doing here. They're just pointing at the camera. And that essentially completes the background and lighting setup for this shot. As for the foreground, I need Asuka and the birds. I'm using this Mafex gargoyle with Asuka, and it's held up by a bottle of mouthwash and some manga volumes. And I'm using this Berserk book in the back to block out the LED from hitting Asuka. I want my foreground to be dimmer than my background here, so that's what that's doing. That's just blocking the light. For the birds, I actually held them with my hand and just used a remote to take the picture while looking at the camera screen duplicated on my TV. I ended up with multiple shots with the birds placed in different parts, as well as different focuses on Asuka and Unit 1. Essentially 4 main compositions I have to combine into one picture in Photoshop. After auto-aligning everything, it really was just a process of erasing and filling in parts between takes. I wanted the background blurry, Asuka in focus, and like 80% of Unit 1 to be in focus, but in the original art, Unit 1 kind of just fades into the background here, so I wanted to do something similar but with the focal distance here. I also added some more birds as transparent layers on top of the picture, and I think they blended pretty nicely with the tangible birds that I have as just like silhouettes flying around. This shot was a healthy mix of digital and tangible methods, and there's just a lot going on with this one. Some tweaks in Lightroom. I really just wanted brighter highlights and some more contrast. Oh, I also adjusted my reds a little bit, but the real magic here is the masks that I used. The bottom one, ever so slightly, makes the buildings brighter. One above that de-highlights Unit 1 a lot, making her dimmer than the background. Similar mask for Asuka, also desaturates her so she's not as vibrant. A mask on the eye, making it this bright, glowing yellow. One gradient mask, excluding the Eva, making the sky just a little bit brighter here. And lastly, this final mask makes some light rays coming from the clouds. And that is everything. I adore how this one turned out, though that's mostly due to the inspiration I took from the original artist. But yeah, this ended up being one of my favorites I shot this month. It's definitely a favorite as far as just like how the setup looks. It's a very ridiculous setup with multi-scale figures and the birds, and I just love how much is going on in the foreground and the background here. It's really complicated, and there's something very fun about really complicated setups like this. I quite like doing these. One of my favorite visuals in Fate Stay Night is whenever they show Saber on the battlefield hill surrounded by swords and dead people and the light rays are coming through the clouds. Diego did do something similar to this, and I love his collection of photos he did to recreate this scene. It's very well done. For my take on this shot, I'm going for a very cinematic look, and I also want to put specific attention to the clouds parting, letting the light shine down on her. To start, I set up these little rocks as a hill for her to stand on, overlooking my messy desktop with files everywhere. I used the head sculpt from the Dress Saber Figma because her hair is down in certain depictions of this scene, and honestly, the hair down with the armor is just a really cool look. To create this hellish looking battlefield, I used a bunch of swords and arrows and stuff, and even SHF Griffith just like torn apart across this landscape here. Thank you, Saber, for stopping the eclipse and killing Griffith. In Fate Zero, there's this one really cool shot of Excalibur's blade stained with blood, and I always thought that was a very interesting image, so I grabbed my blood spray from earlier, and I added some to the end of this Figma sword. It's a very subtle detail, but I think it adds a lot to the shot here. The background is kind of the most important thing to get right here, and I decided to just use this still from the anime. In Photoshop, I pretty much just removed Saber, and now I have the perfect image of the clouds with the light peeking through, which is exactly what I was going for. And then because I have my camera screen duplicated on my computer, I can easily edit the colors in Photoshop and see them update in real time and how they look on the camera, which is a very efficient setup for doing backgrounds and getting the colors right in my backgrounds to match with my scene. Like, I always tell people that, like, if you can, when it comes to using a TV or a monitor as the background for your shot, I always recommend opening it in Photoshop, because then you can edit the brightness and the colors of it and make it match with the scene going on in your camera a bit better. It's also easier to reposition and like adjust and rotate things. It's kind of the ideal way of doing this, I think. I tweaked it a bit and eventually I got this perfect desaturated tan gold color. I noticed there were some gaps in my setup where you could see the bottom of my TV, so I filled those in with some kinetic sand and other random props I had. For lighting, I started by positioning this desk lamp overhead to act as like the light peering through the clouds, and then this other desk lamp on the right side that brightens half the shot, and a softer LED on the left to balance everything out, but still having like a priority to the right side of the shot, getting more light. And with everything set up and the focus adjusted, I shot the picture. I always liked this quote from the visual novel: "On a blood-stained hill of swords, betrayed, she meets her death." So the goal with this picture was to kind of make it a depiction of the vivid image being described by that quote. A detail I added to the shot is I put some blood splatter on the hill she's standing on. It's very subtle and kind of hard to notice in the final shot, but I think when you combine that with the sword that's really close up to the camera and also that quote as a caption, it really completes everything. It's one of those details that brings a shot that could just be like aura slop, like, oh, she looks so cool standing on this hill, but now it's something that actually has a narrative that is true to what you would find in the original source material. Like, it's subtle details like this one that are important, because think about it like this: does the shot tell more of a story with or without the blood splatter? The answer is with. It makes the photo more interesting. And I think that where you can slip little details like this into your photo, you should, because it helps turn your picture into a story. You're not just sharing an image, you're sharing a scene with context and characters and ideas behind it. Think about what are you trying to tell with your picture, and then add details that contribute to whatever it is you're trying to tell. What is your photo trying to say? I wanted my depiction of this scene to be kind of hopeful looking. I want to show you this bloody, hellish battlefield, but with light shining down from above. Because in the context of this scene, it's Saber being given a second chance to save Britain after a long, horrible battle. And that's where I get to making my interpretation of this shot as being literal dark clouds with a silver lining. This is a famous double-page spread from the manga Vagabond of Musashi picking up his sword after not having touched it for a while to gracefully cut through this wave. Ever since I first started doing these fast shutter speed photos, this has been one of those shots I wanted to recreate, using real water for my wave. This is going to be significantly harder than the other photographs in the video, because it's one thing to have particles of water or snow flying through the air. It's a whole different thing to recreate something specific like this though. Going into it, I'm not trying to get the shape down perfectly, but still, if I can't get a photo that is water spinning around the sword in a circular-ish shape of some kind, I'm just gonna scrap the whole thing. That's my minimal viable product, is I need a circle of water. To begin, I made this area out of blue plastic wrap in grocery store bags. Then I started to get a rough pose going, just going off this like original panel, like trying to light it up here a little bit. Lighting is very basic, just 2 desk lamps, 2 LEDs on the ground, and as you can see, yes, I've already started to experiment with some water. I initially was just going to use this spray bottle like I did for that rain effect earlier, but then I decided I need a more natural rise, curve, and fall. Something like a sprinkler kind of, but from underneath underneath the sword. After many experiments across like a fucking hour and a half of throwing water at my desk, I had shot so many photos and my lights kept dying, but I did feel like I was getting somewhere. If nothing else, I was getting awesome takes like this one, with water successfully being shot still mid-air in the setup, meaning this is possible, and I can indeed get this to work if I keep trying. I just need to get the shape right. You see, I realize I'm going to need to combine multiple takes anyways. I don't actually have to make it a circle in one single photo. So the new method was I tried to get a few takes where the water was going up and a few where it was coming down. That way I could erase parts in Photoshop and create the shape I'm aiming for. From any other angle, a shot like this would look like a mess, but from the angle I'm shooting at, it appears as one circle, or at least that's the idea I'm going for. Ultimately, I came up with a good handful of shots to combine, and this is the result. And I love it. This is pretty much exactly what I wanted. I would have liked the circle to be a bit tighter around the sword, but this took a lot of time to get as good as it is. This is about as good as I can make it, at least with my current skills. I then edited in Lightroom, and here are the settings I used. I wanted the shot to be kind of desaturated with grays and blues in the background and water, and then some warmer gold sunlight coming down on some of the droplets in the back of his head. And I used a bunch of masks here, so let me just speed through them so I can get to the rest of this segment. First, big blotch of light here to make the right of the frame brighter. Next, I felt this specific part of the shot needed more blue, so I did that. Same with this part, and same with this part. Then, to add to the earlier blotch that I had, I now have a gradient of light coming from the same spot, and then I just made everything except for my subject brighter, and then I just brushed in the water at his feet to make it more blue. All these masks and edits work together to make a shot that I think looks very peaceful. You know, nothing too loud or harsh, except for the lights, and it makes it feel kind of like ethereal to look at. But that is not all. My sick ass decided I need to do the whole page with all the panels, so let's get to that. For this top panel, I decided to shoot like this puddle with water splashing in it. For a lot of the shots in this segment, I did close-ups with my macro lens. Next, this tall panel below it, I shot this picture of Musashi with a wave in front of him, and then I captured this other macro shot of his sword, and I applied a motion blur to it in Photoshop. Another macro shot of some droplets falling. I captured these by just spilling more water on my desk and shooting at a fast shutter speed. Then I used this take from earlier of his sword behind a wave, and lastly I used this other take from earlier of the water splashing on his face. If you follow the panels in order, the story goes as follows. He sees the water moving, he draws his sword, he swings it, the water splits, spilling droplets everywhere, and the sword comes out the other side of the wave, splashing him in the face. That is the order of events I aim to tell with these panels. And I'm pretty happy with how all of that turned out. I've been wanting to do this shot with actual water for a long time. I did this one a long time ago with cotton balls, but it's not the same, you know. I find it very satisfying that I practiced enough with these type of things to be able to do this shot. One piece of advice I was given though was to invest in a flash. Because like we talked about earlier, fast shutter speed equals darker picture. So therefore, to make up for that, I had to raise my ISO, which caused grain, and then to remove the grain, I had to do so in Photoshop, which makes the image softer, which I don't necessarily want. And even though I love how this picture looks, it was very squishy to not make it too dark with a shutter speed this fast. So yeah, much to learn, much to keep in mind for the future, but for today, I'm very happy with the final result on this one. I actually love how this shot looks.
And yeah, that's pretty much everything. I hope to see you guys before October or sometime during October. I have another BTS video. I've got like another 25 photos I took in my daily photo posting. I think I posted like almost 70 posts in total. So I have a lot more to convert into behind the scenes segments. So I got more to post. I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.